He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. And in that silent moment, the universe realized something terrifying. Dr. Manhattan wasn't just powerful. He was inevitable. If you think you know what he can do, you don't. Not yet. Because Manhattan's true nature doesn't start with power. It starts with a man who died and somehow kept going. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, this journey into godhood only gets stranger. Most stories begin with fate. Manhattan's begins with an accident. A locked chamber. A countdown no one could stop. The moment Jon Osterman stepped inside the intrinsic field subtractor, his human life ended. The chamber ripped apart every atom in his body. And for 3 days, the world stared at an empty room until a skeleton walked back out. Not a living skeleton. A glowing outline piecing itself together, layer by layer. Nerves, muscle, skin. A new being forming like a puzzle solved by physics itself. But here's the kicker. Jon didn't survive the experiment. The experiment survived through Jon. Because every version of Dr. Manhattan's origin repeats the same truth. He didn't gain powers. He became a physical law with consciousness. Imagine awareness spread across every wavelength. Imagine memory that sees past, present, and future like pages of a book. Imagine the loneliness of knowing how every conversation ends before it begins. That was Manhattan's first real power. Time wasn't a river anymore. It was a still ocean. But here's the strange part. Even with this cosmic awareness, Jon didn't leave humanity behind immediately. He tried to fit in. He tried to love. Tried to care. Yet every second, his perception drifted farther from human limits. He would stand in a room and see every atom vibrating, every outcome branching, every choice collapsing into inevitability. People didn't scare him. Their fragility did. And the world felt that fear. When a being can rearrange matter with a gesture, borders mean nothing. When he can vaporize armies at the speed of thought, politics becomes comedy. When he can rewrite the structure of life itself, your species stops feeling like the main character. That's when the whispers started. Is he a weapon? A threat? A god? And Manhattan, ironically, asked the same question. Here's the moment everything changed. And it wasn't a battle. It wasn't an alien invasion. It was a clock. The Doomsday clock. The U.S. government leaned on Manhattan as the ultimate deterrent. A walking nuclear arsenal. A guardian made of raw physics. But that pressure came at a cost. Jon didn't feel stressed like we do. He saw his stress before he experienced it. Try living that way. Try knowing you're going to be accused of something days before it happens. Try knowing the argument you'll have with someone, word for word, before you ever open your mouth. That's why Manhattan feels cold. He isn't heartless. He's drowning in foreknowledge. And then came the breaking point. The moment he saw a future where he left Earth. And that's when he realized something horrifying. Power doesn't isolate you. Time does. But let's get into what you came for. The powers. The limits. And the strange, paradoxical rules behind the blue god of Watchmen. First, understand this. Dr. Manhattan doesn't use powers. He understands the universe so completely that reality reacts to his preferences. Matter manipulation? To Manhattan, it's just rearranging familiar furniture. Teleportation? More like remembering where he wants to be. Size manipulation? A simple adjustment of spatial scale. He doesn't push. He doesn't strain. He just decides. That's what makes him terrifying, but also strangely tragic. Because the more he understood, the less he connected. Every hero asks, what should I do? But Manhattan asks, does choice even exist? And that question cuts deeper than any cosmic blast. One of his most fascinating abilities is quantum awareness. He doesn't merely predict the future. He observes it the same way you observe a painting. Fixed, complete, unchanging. Yet here's the twist. He still feels moments. He still experiences emotion. But he experiences it out of order. Heartbreak today, joy yesterday, conflict tomorrow. Imagine arguing with someone about something they haven't done yet. You'd sound insane. You'd feel insane. And that's Manhattan's whole existence. Here's a mini hook for you. There's a hidden weakness inside all of this. A flaw woven into his godhood. And it's not what you think. But before we hit that, let's break down the raw scope of what he can do. His energy perception is so refined, he can see the radiation in your bones. His constructs can form machines more complex than anything humans can build. His cloning allows him to exist in multiple locations, each version fully aware and fully conscious. He's not multitasking. He's multi-existing. But here comes the shock. With all this power, Manhattan still clings to human memories. He still calls himself Jon Osterman. He still tries to love, still tries to care. And those human feelings? They do something unbelievable. They create vulnerability. Because while time may be fixed, emotion isn't. Emotion is the one thing Manhattan can't stabilize. Here's the tragic irony of his existence. He can rebuild a body atom by atom, but he can't rebuild trust. He can sense every possibility in the universe, but he can't predict human irrationality. He can split himself into countless selves, but not a single one of them feels whole. And deep down, Jon knows it. He's a god who still grieves. A cosmic being haunted by small human moments. A man forced to watch his connections fade not because he wants to lose them, but because time already decided he would. This is the core of Dr. Manhattan's character. The power, the detachment, the crushing inevitability. But we've only scratched the surface. His true limits are far stranger than you think. And one of them might be the most human weakness imaginable. The moment where the god hesitates. Because Dr. Manhattan isn't limitless. He isn't invincible. And the very forces that make him unstoppable also create cracks no one sees coming. So let's step into the blue glow again. Let's talk about the limits Manhattan never admits, but always feels. His first and greatest limit is simple, terrifying, and beautifully human. He can't change the future he already sees. People assume Manhattan is omniscient, like some cosmic narrator. But that's not it. He's trapped. Trapped in a timeline that shows him every moment, yet refuses to let him alter a single one. Imagine knowing every painful event in your life and still walking straight into them. Imagine knowing the world ends and realizing you have no power to stop it. That's Manhattan's curse. His awareness is flawless. His freedom is an illusion. He once said something chilling. Nothing ever ends. But what he meant was even darker. Nothing ever changes for him. Not really. Not permanently. This is the one place where the god stands powerless. Now let's hit the second limit, the one that rewrites how we understand him. Quantum perception isn't universal. It's specific, selective, almost fragile. There are moments in the comics where Manhattan's vision becomes clouded, obscured, disrupted by competing quantum interference. And here's the wild twist. It isn't magic. It isn't kryptonite. It's free will. Whenever someone makes a decision that hasn't stabilized in the timeline yet, Manhattan's perception flickers. He sees branch possibilities, contradictions, 1,000 futures collapsing at once. And in that chaos, he becomes unsure. That uncertainty shocks him more than any villain could. Because if the universe suddenly becomes unpredictable, even for a moment, his entire being destabilizes. It's like pulling gravity out from beneath a planet. And this limit becomes crucial in later stories. Because beings who embody rebellion, chaos, or unpredictable willpower can disrupt the very fabric of Manhattan's awareness. That's why characters like Superman can stand across from him without flinching. Not because they overpower him physically, but because they represent something Manhattan can't decode. Choice, hope, possibility. To Manhattan, those things are like static on a cosmic radio. But here comes the big one. The limit nobody expects. The weakness Manhattan would never admit. The thing that unravels everything he claims to be. His humanity isn't gone. It's buried. And it leaks through the cracks. Let me explain. Manhattan claims he's detached. Beyond emotion. Beyond need. Beyond caring about the lives of individuals. But that's a lie. A quiet, aching lie that follows him through every story. Think about it. Why does he bother explaining himself to people? Why does he pursue relationships? Why does he feel guilt? Why does he leave Earth, only to look back at it with longing? Because the God who sees time like a mural still has a human heart beating under the blue glow. He doesn't escape emotion. He suppresses it. And every time it resurfaces, his decisions shift. His powers wobble. His clarity fractures. This is why Laurie mattered. Why Angela Abar mattered. Why he still thinks of his past as Jon Osterman, a scared, brilliant man trying to make sense of existence. Emotion is his invisible limit, the storm inside the calm. Now let's talk about something even stranger. A paradox that sits at the core of his abilities. Manhattan can rebuild himself from nothing, but he cannot fully control others' perception of him. That sounds small, but it's enormous. Because the more humanity fears him, the more he sees that fear etched across future timelines. And once he sees it, he accepts it as inevitable, which shapes his actions, which deepens the fear. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy created by a being who can't stop watching the future write itself. And this feedback loop shapes entire worlds, entire universes. He sees humanity drifting toward war. He sees himself being blamed. He sees the moment he leaves Earth. And so he leaves. Not because he wants to, because the timeline told him he would. Which brings us to his next limit. A limit so subtle that most readers miss it entirely. He cannot break his own narrative. Once Manhattan perceives a sequence of events, he becomes part of it. His awareness locks him into a script he cannot rewrite. He's a prisoner inside the very structure that makes him powerful. A being with infinite might and almost zero agency. If that isn't tragic, I don't know what is. But Manhattan's limits don't stop at philosophy. He has physical vulnerabilities too, or rather, cosmic ones. Let's dig into those. Despite his absurd power, Manhattan is not omnipresent. Not truly. He splits into multiple forms, but each is still an extension of a single awareness. He is not everywhere at once. He only appears to be. And while he can manipulate matter effortlessly, he cannot create a soul. He cannot replicate consciousness independent of himself. Every clone is him. Every version is one mind. This makes him incredibly powerful, but not infinitely scalable. If multiple threats appeared across the cosmos at once, he'd manage them. But he wouldn't truly multitask. Not like a collective. Not like a hive mind. He's one God wearing many bodies. And that creates another surprising weakness. He can be overwhelmed by simultaneous existential events. Rare, yes, but possible, especially in multiverse-level conflicts. Now for a massive reveal. One tied to DC's larger cosmology. In the Doomsday Clock storyline, we learn a shocking truth. Dr. Manhattan cannot overpower narrative forces like faith, destiny, or symbolic power. He can't crush icons. He can't erase archetypes. And Superman, he isn't just strong. He is the center of the DC metaverse. A symbol so powerful that Manhattan's logic collapses in front of it. This realization terrifies him. For the first time, the future becomes blurry. For the first time, he wonders if he can lose. For the first time, the God feels small. Because stories shape the DC universe as much as physics. And Manhattan, for all his abilities, is still bound by the story he exists in. He can shatter tanks. He can reshape planets. But he cannot shatter destiny. This leads to the final, most profound limit. Dr. Manhattan fears what he cannot calculate. And that fear isn't weakness. It's awakening. It's the spark of Jon Osterman trying to crawl back to life. So where does this leave us? With a being who isn't truly a god. Not fully. Not permanently. He is a paradox. A weapon. A philosopher. A prisoner. A creator. A fragment of a man trapped inside the blueprint of reality. Manhattan's power is unimaginable. But his limits, those shape him far more. They make him compelling. Unpredictable. Beautifully flawed. And they lead to one haunting question. A question that pulls us straight into the next storyline. If the god can doubt himself, what happens when someone else decides to rewrite him? Because in DC lore, that moment is coming. And the universe will never be the same.